right, friends. Good morning to everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Emma Saperstein. I'm the curator here at the San Luis Obispo Museum of Art. I hope that you got a chance to peek into the show before you got started, but the museum is open today, so you'll have time to take a look with all your new knowledge from Adam at the show that just opened for the time being. My sweet director has asked me very specifically to read Adam's bio, so I'm going to do that, and then I'll turn it over to him. Adam Parker Smith is a New York-based sculptor and installation artist. He attended the University of California at Santa Cruz, the Tyler School of Art at Temple University, and the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. His work has been shown widely in the USA as well as internationally in galleries and museums, including Marlborough Gallery, the Brooklyn Museum, Evergold Gallery, The Hole, Anna Fraser, Parisian Laundry, etc. Smith's work has been written about in the New York Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, Art in America, the Village Voice, Artforum, Modern Painters, the Boston Globe, the New Yorker, and the New York Post. We're really, really honored and excited to have Adam with us this morning, and I believe he's going to have it be sort of interactive, so feel free to ask questions as we go, and we'll leave some targeted time at the end for more questions. Thank you so much. Adam's not going to use the mic, but he's promised to project, and if you have a hard time hearing him,
if it doesn't work, we can
make him use the mic.
Yeah. If it's going along and then we feel like we need a mic, then it's right there.
Yeah.
You guys just let me know. Thank you for having me. And as Emma said, I was thinking that we could have it be a little looser. I'm just going to kind of I'm going to fumble through these slides, and as we go, maybe we can ask questions through the lecture. That's a generous word for what I'm about to do, but because there's going to be a lot of different works from different there's different pieces from different bodies of work, and so we may have questions as we go along that it'll be better to address immediately. Okay, we'll just get started. But please, if you can shout out or raise your hand or whatever, or however we want to do it. But please feel free to interrupt me with a question or a concern, and maybe we'll do it like that. We can still have questions at the end, and then I'll hang out even after the end if you're feeling shy. But I'm up here and I have to talk, so you guys can do your part. So. We'll start here. This is actually a work from 10 years ago, and it's a little bit different from what's out front of the museum and what's in the gallery. But I thought it would be a fun place to start, just to sort of set the stage. This is a piece that I did at a gallery in New York called Lou Magnus. They're no longer around. Not thanks to anything that I did, but or maybe, but. So what this is, these are artworks from 78 artists that are New York, for the most part, New York-based artists. And what I did over the course, I'm going to tell you two stories about the show. I'm going to tell you one story, and then I'm going to tell you another story, and they're both true. So we're going to start with the first one, and then I'll tell you the second one, and then you can decide. So we'll start with the first story, which is that over the course of 3 months, I did almost 80 studio visits with artists, and during the studio visit with the artist, I would steal a piece of artwork from their studio. It wouldn't be something major, a piece that they were working on. It would be probably something, adjacent to the main body of work that they were doing. Something small, maybe a sketch, maybe inspiration, maybe even a special utensil that they were using to produce their work. And so I'll back up a little bit. I went to the gallery and I told them, listen, I want to do a show of stolen artwork. In fact, it was a joke. It was a joke at first with some friends of mine in a studio program. I said, I'd be a great curator. I want to do a show where I don't even have to ask permission. I just steal whatever artwork I want and put it in a show. So I thought, well, actually, that's kind of a fun idea. So I went to the gallery and I said, this is the show I want to do. I want to steal all these artworks. And I didn't know if they were going to go for it. Obviously, this amounts essentially to a Class C felony. And of course, they would have been involved. but they were like, yeah, that sounds great. It's been surprising what you can get gallerists to agree to, or museums. I've always been surprised. So this was no different. Oh, sure, let's do that completely illegal show. So over the course of 3 months, I conducted these studio visits. I would go to the studio, and while I was there, steal a work of art. And then 2 weeks before the opening of the show, and these are all of the artworks that I stole, laid out on tables. Instead of hung the way that a lot of them would be, which would maybe be on the wall or on pedestals, these were put on tables so they would look like artifacts, maybe after a crime or a plane crash or even an archaeological dig. These were all of the artifacts that came from this endeavor. So 2 weeks before the show, the gallery emailed all of the artists. I had all of their emails, of course, and said, hey, this is what happened. The artist stole your artwork. They had three options, but we only told them about two. Option number one, of course, was that they could have their work back immediately. Option number two is that they could sign the consignment and the work would be in the show. Option number three, which we didn't mention, was that they could press charges. But it ended up, lo and behold, that all of the artists agreed to be in the show. Actually, a couple weeks before that, the New York Times came undercover on a heist with me, and the reporter came out with me and helped me steal a work of art from one of the artists. And yeah, everything went great. Everyone came. We had opening. The title of the show, it was titled "Thanks," it ended up being successful. You know, BBC did something on it. Art in America. All of the art critics came, and what I found really touching, and you'll understand why when I tell you the second story, is that everyone really participated and talked about what had happened. And when critics came and an artist was present at the show, they would walk them through the show and tell them about the studio visit where I came to their studio and I stole their artwork. So, second version is what happened is I went to the gallery. I told them I'm going to steal all this artwork. They said great. And then I started conducting studio visits. And as they went along, I would go to the studio. And these are 80 artists that I, over the course of a decade, had made connections with. So I would go to the studio and say, listen, I'm doing this show. I'm stealing artwork from artists. But me and you know, you're in the group. We're close, and what I want is an artwork. In fact, I want maybe 5 to 10 artworks. Out of all the artworks I'm going to steal, I need about 5 to 10 artworks that are valuable and would be difficult for me to actually steal. It needs to be believable. The viewers need to believe that I stole it from your studio, but it needs to be, it's something that you would probably notice. And so I want to take an hour and we'll walk around your studio, we'll talk about your work, but we'll talk about what I would steal if I was going to steal something from your studio, and what would best represent your practice and your work, even though maybe it wasn't a painting that was directly on the wall, maybe it's a sketch of that painting or a tool that you use to make these marks, or something that relates to your practice that you feel is it helps identify your voice as an artist. So we would have like a fairly esoteric conversation about how this was going to get curated. And I'd say to them, listen, I am actually stealing artwork from all of these other artists. So it's very important that you don't talk about what we did here today. You are in an exclusive elite group of people who know what's going on. Even the gallery doesn't know what's going on. Please make sure after I leave the studio, we go black, and you'll get the email. You need to be surprised. You need to write the gallery back and let them know, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Well, okay, I guess you can have the artwork. and tell all the other artists that you did a studio visit with me and that it went fine, and yeah, that was great. And so what I did is I ended up creating a panopticon, which is a type of, initially it was a type of prison. There's a central tower and all of these arms that come off of it, and one person essentially can guard many, many prisoners through all of these arms of a prison. And the panopticon is that the tower that the guard exists in has slats and the light is on. And so the guard can see out, but no one can see in. And as long as the lights are on, even if there's not a guard in the room, you're never quite sure if you're being watched or not. And it's the same phenomenon that we have like in an elevator where there's a camera and you're not sure if anybody's watching it or not, but it keeps you from doing anything funky. And so if you think about it, as we go through our day, there's quite a few panopticons that exist that kind of keep us in line. And so the panopticon that I created, of course, was that every single person whose studio I went to, I told them the same exact story. So they all believed that they were part of an exclusive group that knew more than everyone else. And so, in fact, none of the artworks were stolen, but everyone was just lied to. And the gallery was never informed about this part. They were always under the assumption that the works were in fact stolen. They never knew that they were not, that nothing in fact in the show was stolen. And in fact, the New York Times also never knew that until much later when I got in trouble for lying to the New York Times. But that day that I had the reporter come to me earlier on in the morning, I had gone over to the artist's studio and we had rehearsed what that studio visit was going to be like, when they would leave, what I would take, where that object would be. And then I met the reporter at the bar, and before we went over there, and I said, listen, we're going to tell the artist this story. You're coming with me to do a story on what it's like to do studio visits for a show. They believe this. So it wasn't until a year or two after the show where Art in America was going to write an article about what really happened, and they went and they contacted the New York Times to ask them permission to file the story, and they got a cease and desist, and I got a letter from the New York Times that said like, no, lying to the New York Times was a really bad thing to do. And yeah.
So I have a question, because the New York Times clearly has a lot of lawyers.
That's right.
Already authorized them to go steal something with you?
Yeah, again, this is one of the things where it's like, I'm always a little surprised. I contacted the reporter and I said, hey, I have something that I think you might think is interesting.
They were protecting themselves.
Thinking that, yeah, that was, and the gallery too. I was always surprised, like, you guys are really on board for this? This is crazy. It's a Class C felony. And so, yeah, that was one of the things, because I was talking to someone, and it's like, well, I'm going to commit a murder. Do you guys want to come with me and check it out and be an accomplice? So, yeah, I don't know what some of these people were thinking, but, and this was why this show ended up, in fact, a lot of the works that I'll talk about, there's always a risk. I think risk is a really important thing in any industry where innovation is important and creative, being an artist or a musician, I think it's important. And so when it works out, it's cool, but oftentimes, risk leads to failure. So my studio practice has a high rate of failure. And this, in fact, at a certain point, my partner was pregnant. We lived in like a one-bedroom apartment. All of the artworks were being stored in the living room. And, she was going to me, hey, this is like really, this is a little too much risk on this one. We're really betting the farm. You're lying to every single person we know. The New York Times is involved now. The gallery is out in the dark. They're,
She's an accomplice now.
Yeah. So, but what I found really touching actually was that I think to different degrees, artists that were in the show believed the story. Some of them believed it wholeheartedly, and then some of them, I'm quite certain, understood that this was what we were doing. We were building this idea, and they were generous with me enough to do it. And a lot of these are artists who have careers of their own, and are some of them are quite well known. And I always was touched by how generous they were to come along with this on this ride with me. And furthermore, a curator or a critic like Jerry Saltz would come, and I think E.J. Hauser was there the day that Jerry Saltz came, and E.J. Hauser was one of the artists in the show. And she spent a half an hour taking Jerry Saltz around my show and lying to his face about everything that had happened, and I was always really touched. And there was a couple times that happened where, yeah, on my behalf, people were just lying and making up stories, and it became a whole other thing. So,
You have a question, Adam. Do you think that they considered that part of the art, like the story was part of the art, like the narrative around it?
yeah, I mean,
So that for them, maybe it wasn't a lie; it was art.
that's exactly true. Yeah. And also, and it was fun too. Lying is fun, and
We can get away with it.
Jerry Saltz deserves it anyway. So, yeah, it was. I don't. It's and in fact, it sort of set the stage, I think, mentally for me about what oftentimes when you come up with an idea, it seems like, well, that's not something that I should do. And you think about, why is that not something I should do? And oftentimes you realize that it's not illegal, and that the parameters that you've set for what you should and shouldn't be doing are just really set by yourself. So oftentimes I think the creative boundaries that we have are really self-imposed, and it's just a matter of thinking well, I guess that is acceptable. I guess that'll be a good segue into the next piece, which is also in the gallery. Not all of these works are going to have such a long, drawn-out explanation. Some of them will fly through fairly quickly. This work is also in the show, a different image. This is a mammoth. The work in the show are 3 horses, but these are Paleolithic cave drawings, and this is a work that I've done. This is just shag carpet. The work in the show is locally sourced by Emma, and
Abbey carpet?
yeah, very accommodating for this type of thing. And I've just drawn very much like 30,000 years ago these drawings were made. I've just drawn with my finger in the carpet these images. And again, obviously this wasn't such a involved risk, but it's the same thing where I had carpet in my studio for another reason, and it was hanging on the wall, and I ended up doing these drawings and thinking, is that a piece? Can that actually be something that the museum or the gallery puts on the wall? And realizing, yeah, I think it is. And it very much relates to the ephemeral nature of those cave drawings in the first place. They're just mud or maybe a stick on a stone wall that has been scratched, and it seems something delicate that could vanish just the same way that a carpet would take away the marks on the carpet. But of course, these are some of the oldest, in fact, the oldest artifacts that we have that we consider. Art is I'm not sure if I want to use that word, but 30,000 years is a long time for something that is as delicate as this is. Yes?
So those aren't heat treated or anything?
They're not treated in any way, no.
Hard to ship. That's why you make them.
Well, yes. Yeah. See, but this is the thing. You'd think they would be, but if you rolled up this carpet, sent it anywhere you want, unroll it, it would be exactly as it is. And the other thing too, Saul LeWitt is an artist who will give instructions for a mural or a painting, and if you own the rights to that artwork, anybody, any art technician or handler can create that work, and it's a conceptually based piece. So Emma, for instance, has the image that this was taken from, and if at any point for some reason someone came in and completely wiped this away, they would be able to take it and recreate it very easily, and it would still be my work and it would still be that same piece. So, you know, if for instance a collector were to buy the piece and it were to get shipped and for some reason it were to get, you know, something were to happen, depending on the price point, I may be very happy to just fly out there and fix it for them, or maybe they could do it themselves. What happened after I did the stolen artwork show and some of these other more conceptual projects is I got a lot of interest from galleries on doing more works like this. And the problem is that there were a lot of perfect things that came together to, for instance, to make the show Thanks, where I stole the artwork, possible. And what happened is that the other ideas that I had that were similar conceptually, they ended up really not coming together because, like I said, failure is kind of a big part of taking risks. And so for about 5 years, I really struggled to figure out what my next move was, and I had kind of a crossroads. Was I going to be a more conceptually based artist, you know, drawing on carpets and stealing artwork, or was I going to, you know, make things with my hands, sculpture and paintings? And so I decided kind of to take that branch. And this is a piece that is sort of, I guess, the one of the stepping stones that led to a lot of the works that are in the gallery now, the inflatable works. I devised a way to cast inflatable mylar balloons. This was one of those first pieces. This one was an absolute disaster. You can tell it's going to be a disaster. This was in the beginning stages, but it already looks bad. It was supposed to be, and it ended up being, and it is, and it actually is finished, and it's been installed in a collector's home. But it's a flock of birds, inflatable balloons that are cast in resin, and we're sort of assembling them here on steel armature, so they look like they're sort of spiraling upwards. But a lot of these early experiences informed the way that the work in the gallery is made now, and sort of what not to do or what not to agree to do. Let's see, hold on, there's a little lag time here. Oh, there we go. This is a piece titled Narcissist. And so this is after I'd been creating resin works and sort of paring it down. You can see what a mess that first piece was. This is a little bit more simple, conceptually a little more streamlined. And this, of course, is sort of the sister or cousin piece of the Narcissist that's in the gallery, the tropical fish. This was one of the first ones I did of this dolphin. And actually, I think I've talked with some of you about it during the show, but one of the biggest challenges for this piece, after I'd figured out how to cast the balloons in resin. So this is, it's cast urethane and then catalyzed urethane, sort of like an automotive paint. So it's not an actual balloon. But the biggest challenge was figuring out the mirror, because the mirror had to hold the weight of the sculpture, and also I had to have the reflective surface be on the front of the mirror instead of the back. Plate mirror glass, of course, has a 1/4 inch of glass, and the reflective surface is on the back. And these are little things that all of a sudden you realize you have to deal with. You get this idea, it's going to be a balloon, it's going to be on the mirror. But you know, that 1/4 inch right there, you would be able to see the steel rod that holds the balloon up. So we had to figure out a way to get the reflective surface on the front of that 1/4 inch instead of the back. And so this is actually a pharmaceutical grade, high polished stainless steel. And you can see afterwards, if you look at the mirror in the show, it's done the same way, and it's a little bit darker than regular plate glass mirror. So anyway, this is the first Narcissist. This is a piece titled Plank Piece. This is actually taken from an artist, Charles Ray, who did a piece using his own body in the, I think 70s was when the first one, and there's a couple where he's held up against a wall with a plank like this. And a few artists have done renditions of Plank Piece, Charles Ray Plank Piece. Matthew Day Jackson, I think, has done one with a spaceman. Mine here is with a cactus balloon. And you can see, sorry, there's just a little, yeah, some of the detail here. And I have a process shot so you can kind of, you believe me when I tell you that it's resin and not, there, see? See, I told you. So that was before we had painted it. I won't talk much about this piece. This is in the gallery. This is Contrapposto Pool Float. I think this one is titled Nude Carolyn. So this is my partner actually. This is a portrait of her nude, and in a sort of a Hellenistic pose, which is originally in some of the early sculpture, that everybody was really stiff, and then someone had figured out that we could be twisting and moving and being a little more interesting. So this is sort of a takeoff of that. There's Carolyn actually helping make her piece. This is Carolyn's also an artist, and we oftentimes share a studio together. And there will be a lot of people involved in the production of artworks. The work is always painted by someone that knows what they're doing, and a lot of times they're cast by someone that knows what they're doing. But every once in a while, Carolyn and I take a stab at it. And so you can see this is the just a original pool float that we made a mold off of, which is normally a pretty difficult thing to do because, of course, they're inflated, and the idea of making a mold off of an inflatable object can be pretty challenging. And here they are getting the steel armature and sort of getting it ready to go off and be painted. This is a piece titled Sinking Slowly into Darkness. It's a black marble pedestal and another inflatable mylar balloon. This piece is in the show. I'm going to go to the next slide here so we can start talking about how it was made. It was some of the pieces. I'll come up with the idea and then figure out, all right, well, how are we going to make this? And sometimes it works out well. I'll think, well, we'll just use this material, and this should work. But oftentimes it's a disaster, and nothing works. And the spaghetti vases were a piece that it took about a year to figure out how to make, and I tried everything under the sun to figure out how we were finally going to produce these. And by the time it was all done, well, in the beginning I thought I'm going to make a vase. I want it to look like frozen spaghetti. I was living upstate, so I made a mold of an amphora, and I went and I cooked a bunch of spaghetti, and I poured it in the mold, and I put some sauce in there, and I put it outside for a night, and I woke up the next morning and cracked it open, and it was exactly the piece that I wanted, only frozen. And I took pictures of it, and then I put it on Instagram. Look at this new piece that I made. And everyone instantly was like, oh, this is amazing. We've got to show this. We want to buy one. No problem. Now I just am going to make it out of something that doesn't melt. So I started on that. And anyway, long story short, by the time I was done, it was a year later. No one was interested. Everyone hated it. And I'd used a bunch of my money and a bunch of other people's money, and everyone was upset. But in the end, it ended up being a win for me, actually. No one else really came out ahead. But it was a win just to have accomplished the task that I had set out to do. So what we ended up doing, we ended up using a polymer clay that reacted to heat. And I had a machine shop make a pasta roller just like you would make homemade spaghetti with. Mine was a little bit oversized. I wanted my noodles to be bigger just visually so that it would read. It's kind of an absurd and goofy piece, but I have a master's in painting, and I find that oftentimes the sculpture that I make has a lot of qualities that are really formal in terms of line and gesture and movement and color. And so those are all things ultimately that I really focused on for these spaghetti vases, were those things. So with that said, I needed a little bit bigger noodle. We had a machine shop make this apparatus. These guys out in Western Pennsylvania, I went to them and I said, I need to do this thing. I'm always surprised at how open, you'd think that oftentimes the language and the vernacular that we use to talk about contemporary art is really exclusive and difficult. And every time that I ever go anywhere where I go into a machine shop, a bunch of guys are in there, hey, listen, I'm making this spaghetti vase. I need a spaghetti roller. And they're always like, oh yeah, we get it. Yeah, of course the noodles have to be bigger. Regular, we're sitting there measuring with the guys and they're going, well, the regular spaghetti is only 2 millimeters. You're gonna need at least a 7 millimeter noodle, I think. So, we're working through that. And I've always found those conversations to just be as easy as they are with people who are highly educated about art. I'm not surprised anymore. But so anyway, they made this beautiful machine, and we ended up making the pasta very much the same way that you make normal pasta. Only, of course, we were having to use respirators, and this is not flour, but resin dust. But we used a lot of the same techniques that one would use when making pasta. Let's see here. There we are, getting our noodles ready. Here are the molds that the noodles would go into. And here we are finishing one of them. There's about 5 different, you saw the different molds. There's about 5 different versions of these, and there are additions of 6, just so that I could use lots of other people's money when doing this. And then ultimately they came out sort of flat like this. And the final step that we figured out, and you'll see if and when you go look at the vase that's in the gallery, is they're very glassy. They look like they've got a deep coat on top of them. I ended up using a spit roaster for pigs, and we put the vase on there, and we would spin them for two days as we put self-leveling resin on, and it was like a rotisserie chicken. It's one of the reasons rotisserie chicken. In fact, I got the idea. There's a rotisserie chicken place in our old neighborhood. It's a predominantly Puerto Rican neighborhood, and this is an amazing Puerto Rican rotisserie chicken shop. And I realized that a rotisserie chicken, it's not just baked. Because it's spinning, the grease never leaves the chicken. It never drips off. It stays on top, and so the chickens are, in fact, in a way, almost deep fried because they have a thick coat of grease that's orbiting the chicken the whole time it's cooking. And so I realized I need a thick coat of grease/resin to be orbiting the vase. And so I went and I got the same. I had to get not a rotisserie chicken spinner, but one for a pig. So anyway, I have that at my house. Actually, I've been meaning to actually spit roast a pig with this. I have all the stuff. It's just a matter of figuring out when we're going to do that. But I want to. Anyway, that's another thing. Let's see. I'm gonna talk about the cubes really quick. This was the first show that I did with the marble cubes. Again, this is sort of a departure from the resin work and a long departure from stealing artwork. These are completely. We've been talking about security for these, and weighing 1.5 tons each, they are in fact their own security in that they can't be moved. But this was the first show that I did with the cubes. I had this idea that I wanted to compress Greco-Roman antiquity like it had been in a garbage compactor and have them carved in marble. And I wanted a show where you would walk in and initially you would see 6 sort of minimalist cubes. And then the next thing that you would realize is, in fact, it was not a minimalist cube show, but these were actual figures that had been compressed. And so this is Cupid triumphant, and Apollo of Belvedere, and Mars and Venus, and Augustus of Prima Porta. So these are all taken from original sculptures that we were able to get 3D scans of. Here's Mars, or here's Venus and Amor. So the Uffizi, for instance, will scan. They do 3D scans of all their sculptures now as well. You know, most of these museums used to make plaster backups of the sculptures, and they still have that. But in addition to that, now they have 3D scans of all of the sculptures. And so we were able to get access to some of these works. And with my brother and a couple other engineers, we were able to develop an algorithm in a couple programs. We used Houdini and actually a really weird program called RealFlow, which they use if you ever watch commercials and they're putting like chocolate on Snickers bars. It's a liquid, it's like a CGI liquid program where you can sort of control liquids. And essentially, we would turn these models of the figures into liquids, and here, so this, for instance, is Ganymede and Jupiter's eagle. This is a 3D scan of one of the sculptures that we used, and so we would begin to manipulate the sculpture to start to kind of compress it. Some of the initial stages were not the complex compression algorithms, but just really simple ZBrush, where we would start to put, get things into a tighter cube, and then actually this is that sculpture. I'm sort of jumping around here, but this is that sculpture that you just saw 3D images of, actually carved in marble in the West Village. But this, let's see. So this is a good example of this is Cupid triumphant, and you can see sort of the different compression that happened till we end up with this is what we ended up with carving. So we would take the model, make the 3D sculpture, and this is something that my brother and I ended up, the two of us just do it. Together we had more of a team to help us figure it out. It's a very complicated program and a very complicated thing to do, but they trained us just to do this one thing. So now we cannot do a lot of other things in Houdini. In fact, not really anything, except for this one very complicated thing. And so we'll create the model, a 3D model like this, and then it gets sent over to, here's another angle of this so you can see if it works. Let's see here. Where are we at? Yeah, so there's my brother. And this is in Italy. We're picking out the marble that we're going to use to carve the sculpture. This is Elena. She's 22 years old. She is the cousin of the two men who owned the fabrication studio. They're both a little bit older, and they're very, very Italian. And for the first couple months, communication with them was nearly impossible about just on every level. And I ended up hiring Elena to just be able to communicate I don't think it was just the Italian part, it was other stuff too. But so what was very cool is we were able to go to this quarry in Carrara, and they've been taking marble out of the quarry for over 2,000 years. And as you drive into Carrara, you look up in the mountains and it looks like it's snowing, and it's just that the mountain, they've taken about half the mountain down. Franco, who owns, there's multiple families who own the quarry, and then he owns the fabrication studio that carves the marble pieces. 2,500 years ago, the Romans had a little village up on the mountain that it was a village for slaves. So they would bring the slaves up into the mountains, they would carve marble or cut out blocks all day long, and then they would bring them back down into this village. And now, or this encampment, which is now a village, and Franco was actually born in this village, and he's lived there his whole life sort of on the mountain, and this is many, many generations of people working in the quarry and carving marble And so, you know, for me to be able to work with this team was really a pretty interesting thing. Actually, this next slide here, there's Franco talking. We're sort of, I don't know what we're discussing. It looks intense, though. It always is intense. This is the robot actually carving. You can see this is the robot arm here. And there was a lot of things that I really didn't understand about this process. I told the gallery, hey, we're going to do this show. And we made 3D renderings from the models that we had. And I photoshopped them into the gallery. And then they ended up selling them to a couple collectors. And then the director came to me and said, so, can we actually make this artwork? And I said, yeah. I'm just finding a place that can carve the marble. So I called around and I found this place in Italy. And you know, I called the director up and, hey, I found this place. He goes, let's fly over there. You know, we gotta get going. We sold this work to the collectors. I gotta know that we can make this. Let's go on Wednesday. You know, it was like Tuesday. I said, okay, great. And he goes, this is the origin story. I think we should bring a celebrity or two with us. So he ended up inviting some people, and we all go up there, and they rented a ridiculous car, and we're driving up to the quarry to meet Franco and check out the whole operation. And he leans over to me again. And he goes, so this is, we're going to be able to do this, right? They're going to be able to make these, right? And I said, well, now we're here. We're past the event horizon. So the answer is I actually don't know. And so we went, and you know, Franco was like, yeah, of course we can do it. But it was really not that clear to me. And one of the things that was most concerning, the process is that the 3D file that we make is fed into the computer, and then the robot, it's sort of like a 3D printer, only it's a reductive process, so they're carving instead of printing. The robot carves down to about 70%. In my mind, I had the robot carving like 100%. We give them the model, the robot makes it look exactly like the model, voila. So we went over, they said, yeah, we gave them a bunch of money, and they started carving, and I went back 3 months later to check on the cubes, and they had just come off the robot, and they're in the workshop, and they look like blobs. And I remember really having like a nervous breakdown because I'd already told the gallery we're going to do the show. We have 6 cubes in the show, and we've already sold a couple of them, and this was like, you know, my whole career. And so they go, oh, no, the robot just takes off most of the material. We're going to hand carve all of the detail, all the faces, all the hair, all the fabric. I thought there's no way that any of that is possible. And so I was really depressed for a while, and I came back in another month, and yeah, they had like performed these miracles. They have master carvers over there who can basically do anything, and not only can they replicate Bernini's like what's out on the lawn, but they can replicate a Bernini while he's upside down and backwards and his face is in a crevice. So, you know, if you think about Bernini's team a couple hundred years ago, carving those statues, you know, the face was upright the way it's supposed to be in a sort of anatomical position. Well, David out on the lawn there, if you look at him, his face is inside of a crevice. And when that came off of the machine, the robot hadn't carved any of his face. And so the master carver that carved that was upside down, so he's looking at an angle the whole time, carving into a crevice, and the work that they did was absolutely incredible. This is Franco's shop. These are Franco's guys. You know, none of them work for me. I am in touch with, actually I'm in touch with Massimo, and then Massimo talks to Franco, and then Franco talks to his guys. It's a whole big thing. But I did post some of these pictures on Instagram, and I immediately got some really negative feedback, how atrocious it was that I could have a studio where people were working without respiratory devices. This is a giant OSHA violation. They're breathing, you know, calcium carbonate and smoking. To which I replied, these are Italians. If you wear a respirator, you can't smoke at the same time. You're being I told her you're being culturally insensitive. And that was sort of the end of the end of that problem. Actually, this next picture is them carving David, and you can see what a challenge he's carving David's face, and afterwards you can go out on the lawn and sort of take a look at it. But he's carving David's face basically upside down at an angle here, that was one of the things I think that was most impressive to me. And again, this is something that has been. I'm just checking the time here because we're kind of blowing through here. Yeah. All right. Well, maybe we'll wrap it up here in a second. There's some pieces I didn't talk about, but c'est la vie. Anyway, this for me, I really have had to let go of a lot of control with my process, obviously, but allowing other people in. Sometimes some really incredible magical things happen, whether it's artists lying to Jerry Saltz or master carvers. A lot of them sort of, I think he's smoking as well. They sort of adopt the projects as their own, and it becomes sort of a communal project. And going over there now, we've developed a language, a visual language, where they know what we're looking for. And oftentimes I feel like a little bit of a spectator in my own practice, watching other people interact with the work or create the work. So that's been something that I think has always been really fun for me. So maybe we'll kind of end there. There was more, but and then we can have time for some questions because we've got 10 minutes still. And yeah.
Well, thank you so much. So
Sure.
Awesome. Yeah.
Sure.
So cool. I guess this is more of like praise and a comment that I just love how the work really, pardon my language, but really fucks with the idea of ownership.
Oh yeah.
In every way.
Right.
And even in the last couple things you said, it's does it even belong to you conceptually?
Right.
Or
Right.
Conceptually,
Right.
is it your work if all these other,
Yeah.
I just really love that about
Yeah.
it.
Thanks a lot.
Especially the reference to very high art.
Right.
And I don't know, just gorgeous. Yeah.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I think I have to make a living, so at some point, I have to have some ownership enough that my name is on the check.
Yeah.
But I think it's become less important to me, and I think the reward of working with other people and having other people's creative input outweighs really the glory of being a one-man band. The other thing too is that I heavily rely on other people. I am of average intelligence and for the most part, not a lot of technical proficiency. So it's important for me to have other people in the process. Otherwise, we would be doing, firmly mediocre stuff.
Yeah.
Totally. Or at least I would be.
But also,
Yeah.
even just the idea of an ownership in terms of collection. I'm just thinking about thanks, a
Right.
stolen show, but is it really stolen? And then
Yeah.
I don't know, just
Well, yeah, or how a lot of
how
the
do you
museums.
remove this if you buy this? I don't know. Just
Well, a forklift, but yeah. But no, a lot of the museums, the way that their collections were, you look at the Met, and most of it's appropriated or stolen. And even today, every couple of weeks, you look in the news. Greece wants their stuff back, or there's a Jewish family who's like, hey, that's our painting. It was stolen from us. And so a vast amount of artwork, and that was part of this show as well. And thanks for bringing it up, or part of the show. Thanks was this idea of where museums and institutions are even getting this, and you've got indigenous artwork. You go to the Met, and none of that stuff is really supposed to be there. So yes.
So you've talked about risk all through this, and I see that as really a big through line in your practice. How has your relationship to risk changed over the last 10 years? I mean, driving up that mountain and actually not knowing if it's going to be able to be hacked, that's risk.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I don't know. I think I have a lot of stress-related physical ailments. I've become a little more comfortable with it, and in fact, I now, initially earlier on in my creative career, failure was really difficult for me, and now I look at failure, a certain percentage of failure, as part of an equation that relates to making sure that there's enough innovation happening. So it actually makes me more nervous now if there is no failure, because in a way that means that we're not pushing hard enough. I like to be failing about 30-40% of the time. So when I have failures now in the studio, it's an indicator of a couple things. Number one, I'm pushing. And then number two, even better, and this doesn't happen every time, but oftentimes we're learning something when we're failing. So I've gotten a little more comfortable with it. But with that said, part of failing and then growing is making sure, I'm trying to fail harder than I've ever failed before every time I fail next time. And some of these failures seem insurmountable. It's like, Jesus, that was bad. I almost bankrupted myself and the gallery. What am I going to do for my next show? Yeah.
So what are you going to do next?
I'm not sure. Yeah, bodily harm. I don't know. Yeah, yeah. I know. No, it's difficult. That's one of the things, where you continue to have to push. That in itself is pretty stressful. Yeah.
Oh, just following up on that, there's, post-pandemic, maybe kind of like a super chaotic cultural landscape going on right now. So people are like, it's and just-in-time processing of opportunity or capital products, et cetera.
Right.
How has this period been different than, let's say, before the pandemic for you, related to these issues of stress, risk, and failure issues?
The pandemic was really weird for the art world. Because it was the art market was stronger in the 2 years of the pandemic than it's ever been before. What happened was people were at home and they had the stock market was up. They weren't traveling. They weren't going out to restaurants. They had a lot of income and they were bored. And people were buying artwork like crazy. And so the art world really got flipped upside down during the pandemic. In that everyone was showing and making so much money selling art. That it actually has been really confusing for myself and for a lot of institutions and galleries to sort of have navigated through that. I'm not sure. It's complicated because I looked at the pandemic through the lens of a New Yorker, as a parent with children in school, and as an artist. And each one of those things, there were horrific elements, and then there were magical parts of it. I was living in the city, and there were people dying, and there were refrigerator trucks with bodies, and there was an 8 o'clock cheer. But then also I could get down to Rockaway Beach in 15 minutes, and that had been an hour and a half before. And so all of a sudden, in May, I was able to go down to the beach with my kids, like on a Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning, no problem. So we would walk around, and there was no one down there, and there were seals on the beach, and so a lot of it was really confusing. There weren't any art fairs, there weren't any shows, but all of a sudden, we were making money selling artwork. So it was a really like tumultuous, confusing time. So, yeah.
Maybe one more question?
Sean?
Sure.
Did you try to hide your spaghetti vase from the Italians?
No, I've showed it to them, and yeah, they were like, yeah, of course, of course, of course that's the thing. And they're like, it's bucatini? I was like, no, it's a little bit bigger than bucatini. And they're like, yeah, of course. So yeah, that's another thing where, sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna think of a really absurd idea, and then I show it to people, and they're like, yeah, of course. So thank you guys for coming. Yeah.